We're thinking that it's pretty uncontroversial to say that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has been having better luck than DC's extended universe. With Wakanda Forever, Marvel isn't just solidifying its lead, it's even taking cheeky jabs at its DC rivals. In this video, we're going to talk about one notorious DCEU moment that's recreated in Wakanda Forever, and then we'll look at all the questions that Marvel's latest leaves unanswered. First, say it with us. Why did you say that name? The twist that finally ends the war between Batman and Superman in the DCEU's second installment would soon be eclipsed by other, worse scenes in the franchise. But we think that even now, it's hard to match the Martha scene for its sheer ridiculousness. If you've forgotten the Martha scene since Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice came out, here's a quick recap. Following the ending of Man of Steel, in which Superman's battle with Zod causes wanton destruction in Metropolis, Gotham's nocturnal knight decides that Kal-El is too dangerous to leave on Earth. He spends most of the movie coming up with a way to kill the last son of Krypton, and that includes pinching kryptonite that Lex Luthor is illegally smuggling for his own schemes. Luthor himself has had his own schemes in play, and as a way to draw Superman out, kidnaps Lois Lane and his mother, Martha Kent. When Supes finds out about this, Luthor tells him the only way to get Martha back is to kill Batman. This leads to a big old fight that Batman ends up winning, but just as Bats is about to kill Superman, he begs him to save his mom, calling her Martha. As it happens, Martha was Bruce Wayne's mom's name too. With that, all hostilities ended, and a random cameo from Wonder Woman completes the DC movie trinity. Great movie, 10 out of 10. Let's move on. Now, considering how that scene was, we were surprised to see it recreated in the Black Panther sequel. Okay, it's not like Shuri and Namor's moms have the same name, but they're an important part of their stories. The big motivator behind Namor's hatred of the surface world was that when he resurfaced to bury his mom on her ancestral land, he found that a slaver hacienda stood upon it. The ruler of Talokan made pretty short work of them, and ever since, it's been his dream to make short work of the rest of the world. Shuri, meanwhile, gets a similar motivation later in the movie. Namor ends up killing her mom, Ramonda, during his attack on Wakanda. That fills Shuri with a need for revenge, and after recreating the heart-shaped herb, she plans an all-out counterattack against Talokan. In the midst of the fighting, Namor and Shuri get some alone time, in which Shuri manages to pin Namor down with a spear to his chest, which was exactly how Batman had Superman, come to think of it. But before she can push the spear in and take her revenge, she has an epiphany about what she's doing. It occurs to her that by killing Namor, she'd be participating in the same cycle of vengeance that Namor started in the first place, and she'd be doing it for the same reason. Deciding to be the breaker of the cycle, she forms an alliance with him instead.
Aneka, where is your spear?
Shuri gave me this to try.
Coming up, here's why we think this works for Wakanda Forever and not for Batman vs. Superman. While we joke about the Martha scene, it's not impossible to see where Zack Snyder was going. Batman ultimately spares Superman, not because their moms have the same name, but because the coincidence makes Bruce realize that he's about to kill a man. Snyder's version of Batman is less worried about that sort of thing than most other versions, but still, that's the epiphany that makes Batman drop the spear. The problem with this scene is that Superman, being a man or an alien, shouldn't really make a difference here. The whole reason Bruce swore to murder Superman in the first place is because he destroyed Metropolis. Clark's planet has no bearing on that. After all, Batman has put away human criminals for doing a lot less. What if those folks had moms named Martha? In the Black Panther movie, Shuri's realization about moms has an impact on her motivations. She realizes that if she kills Namor because he killed her mom, she'd be no better than Namor himself. After her skepticism earlier in the movie, Shuri realizes that everything she does continues a story that began with her ancestors, and to kill Namor in vengeance would be to dishonor the legacy of Ramonda and T'Challa. She takes the high road and offers Namor compassion instead of death, not unlike what T'Challa once did. That works so much better than Martha. Let's move on to answering some of the burning questions left by the movie. Starting right at the top, Wakanda Forever starts with very minimal fanfare. Before even the Marvel Studios logo has popped up, we find ourselves in Shuri's laboratory, and she and her team are working against the clock. We learn that she's trying to synthesize the heart-shaped herb to save T'Challa, who's suffering from a disease and is close to dying. Before Shuri makes any progress, Ramonda delivers the tragic news: T'Challa is gone. There's an obvious real-world answer to this question, but it does feel kinda weird that we don't know anything about anything in this scene. What disease killed T'Challa? How did he get it? Was there no risk of passing it to someone else? Ultimately, this scene only exists to write T'Challa out of the story and set up the grief that forms the overarching theme of the movie. Still, you can't help but think that if they'd done this with any other character, we'd be calling it bad writing. Up next, we'll skip straight to the ending. Who exactly rules Wakanda now? For a lot of the country's history, the Black Panther and the ruler of Wakanda have been the same person. That was the case with T'Challa, for instance. But it's entirely possible for a different person to play each of those roles. That was the case of T'Chaka, the previous king, and dad to T'Challa and Shuri. He was too old to be the Black Panther, of course, so his son took over the mantle. With that in mind, the movie really ought to have cleared up if, in the end, Shuri had become Queen of Wakanda and the Black Panther. There's a scene at the end of the movie where the Wakandans have arranged the usual trial by combat to determine the next ruler. M'Baku shows up to challenge for the throne, but it's implied that no one, not even Shuri, answers the call. Instead, the Black Panther is busy grieving her brother on a beach in Haiti. Most fans might take this to mean that M'Baku is now the king of Wakanda. He certainly proves his ability to rule by providing the most sage advice to Shuri throughout the movie. There's also the fact that Shuri doesn't have the experience or temperament to rule. At the same time, though, it's possible that this is being left open-ended on purpose so that Marvel Studios has room to change their mind later.
We open the barrier.
Moving on, we'll speculate on what's next for Everett Ross. Martin Freeman's good-natured CIA agent was introduced in the first Black Panther, and he's a lot more involved in Wakandan affairs than he ever thought he'd be. We see in Wakanda Forever that Ross is now an informant for the African nation, and the ruling family of the country basically has him on speed dial. Ross, keeping his promise, informs the Wakandans that the CIA thinks they're responsible for fighting against American efforts to mine vibranium from the ocean. This double agent leads to Ross being arrested. He's caught in the act by the director of the CIA herself, who happens to be the same Valentina we've seen in multiple cameos lately, and who happens to be his ex-wife. Okoye, in the Midnight Angel suit that she hates, busts Ross out of captivity and spirits him away to Wakanda at the end of the movie. So where does he go from there? We haven't seen the last of the character by any means, since we know he's going to be back in next year's Secret Invasion. What'll his role be there? What comes after that? It's all up in the air. And finally, how long Wakanda and Talokan will remain in peace? At the end of their climactic showdown, Namor accepts Shuri's offer of mercy and agrees to end all hostilities in exchange for, his life. But that won't be the end of the story by any means. For starters, it looks like the Talakanels aren't used to surrendering, and they aren't happy about the fact that Namor gave up. The Submariner tries to spin it as a win, saying that Wakanda will now tap them as allies while the world closes in around them, but whether that'll actually play out remains to be seen. Comic fans know that this has to just be a temporary reprieve from the conflict. The countries are basically locked in a state of war eternally, so they'll be fighting against each other soon enough. How soon, though? And how will that end up happening? Looks like that'll be a question for Black Panther 3. That's it for today's video. What questions are you still left asking about the future of the Black Panther franchise? Do you have any ideas for what the answers to our questions might be? Drop your responses in the comment section below. And don't disappear below the surface of the ocean without liking, sharing, and subscribing.